At a lavish wedding, surrounded by hundreds of couples holding hands, one man sat alone at the back table. 200 eyes turned toward him when the groom called his name from the microphone. Caleb Turner, a single father who had lived invisible for 15 years, felt the weight of every stare. He had not been weak. He had chosen to disappear to raise his daughter. But tonight, he was forced into the light. The only question left was this: when a man has been invisible for so long, does he still know how to exist for himself? But that moment at the wedding was still 3 days away. Right now, Caleb Turner stood in his kitchen, staring at a cream-colored envelope he had pulled from the mail stack. The return address belonged to Marcus Brennan, someone he had not spoken to in over a decade. The envelope felt heavier than it should have. He slid the invitation out. Gold-embossed lettering announced Marcus's wedding. Black tie. Open bar. +1 encouraged. Caleb read the date twice, then slipped the card back inside and placed it at the bottom of the recycling bin beneath old newspapers and junk mail. He told himself it was practical. He had no reason to go. Marcus had moved on years ago, built a life Caleb could not follow into. That was how things worked. People drifted. It was easier that way. The next morning, Lily found the invitation. She came downstairs holding it between 2 fingers like evidence. Her dark hair was pulled into a messy ponytail, and her eyes carried that sharp look she got when she was about to call him out on something. She was 17 now, nearly an adult, and she had stopped letting him get away with hiding. "You were going to throw this away," Lily said. It was not a question. She set the invitation on the kitchen table between them. Caleb poured himself coffee and did not look at her. He could feel her stare, steady and unrelenting. She had gotten that from him, the ability to wait someone out in silence. "I don't know Marcus anymore," Caleb finally said. He kept his voice even, like it was a simple fact and not an excuse. "It's been 15 years. People change." Lily sat down across from him and folded her arms. She did not pick up her phone. She did not look away. That was when Caleb knew this was not going to be a short conversation. "You're going," she said. Her tone left no room for negotiation. Caleb looked up from his coffee. "Lily, I'm not going to a wedding where I don't know anyone just because some guy I used to work with decided to invite me out of politeness." She shook her head. "It's not about Marcus. It's about you." Caleb set his mug down. "What's that supposed to mean?" Lily leaned forward, and her voice dropped. Not in anger, but in something heavier. Concern, maybe. Or fear. "Dad, I'm leaving for college in 4 months, and I'm scared that when I go, you're just going to disappear." The words hit harder than Caleb expected. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Lily kept talking. "You've spent my whole life making sure I had everything I needed. You gave up your friends. You stopped going out. You turned yourself into my dad and nothing else. And I love you for that. But I'm terrified that the second I leave, you're going to wake up one day and realize you don't know how to be a person anymore." Caleb felt something crack inside his chest. He wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, that he was fine, that he had always been fine. But the truth was sitting right there between them, quiet and undeniable. He had become invisible, not to her, but to himself. He had spent 15 years in a routine so tight it had stopped feeling like a choice. Work, home, groceries, dinner, repeat. He had convinced himself it was enough, that being a father was enough, that he did not need anything else. "I'm not asking you to change your whole life," Lily said, her voice softer now. "I'm just asking you to go to one wedding. Talk to people. Be seen. Just once. From me." Caleb looked at his daughter and saw the girl he had raised and the woman she was becoming. She was right. She was always right. He hated that. "Fine," he said. "I'll go." Lily smiled. A real one. not the small, careful smiles she gave when she was trying to make him feel better. Good. And you're going to stay the whole time. No sneaking out early. Caleb raised an eyebrow. I didn't agree to that. She stood up and grabbed the invitation. Too late. I'm putting this on the fridge so you can't throw it away again. The week leading up to the wedding moved slowly. Caleb found himself thinking about it more than he wanted to. He had not been to a social event in years, not one that was not related to Lily's school or some parent obligation. He did not own a suit that fit anymore. He had to go to a department store and buy one, and even that felt strange. The salesman kept asking questions about the occasion, trying to make conversation, and Caleb gave short answers until the man stopped trying. On the morning of the wedding, Lily helped him with his tie. She stood in front of him in the hallway, her hands moving with the kind of confidence that made him realize she had learned things without him. She had grown up. She did not need him the way she used to, and that thought terrified him more than any wedding ever could. You look good, she said, stepping back to examine her work. Caleb glanced at himself in the mirror. He looked like someone playing dress-up, like a man trying to remember what normal people did. I look ridiculous, he muttered. Lily rolled her eyes. You look like someone who's about to go have a good time. Try to remember what that feels like. Caleb drove to the venue alone. The wedding was being held at a restored manor on the edge of town, the kind of place that cost more to rent than Caleb made in 3 months. He parked in the far corner of the lot, where the cars were older and less polished. He sat in his truck for 10 minutes, gripping the steering wheel, telling himself he could still leave. No one would notice. Marcus probably would not even remember inviting him. But then he thought about Lily, about the way she had looked at him that morning, the hope in her eyes. He thought about the question she had asked, the one she had not said out loud. Do you even know how to exist without me? Caleb did not have an answer, but he owed it to her, and maybe to himself, to find out. He got out of the truck and walked toward the entrance, his hands in his pockets, his heart hammering in a way it had not in 15 years. The reception hall was everything Caleb had expected and feared. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, casting warm light over tables draped in white linen. Flowers spilled from centerpieces in shades of blush and ivory. Everywhere he looked, couples stood together, hands intertwined, leaning into each other with the ease of people who belonged. Caleb felt like he had walked onto a stage mid-performance without knowing his lines. He made his way to the seating chart by the entrance. His name was printed on a small card, Table 18. He scanned the room and found it in the back corner, partially hidden behind a decorative column. Relief washed over him. At least he could sit with his back to most of the crowd. At least he could make himself small. The table was half full when he arrived. A middle-aged couple sat on one side, dressed in matching shades of navy. They were deep in conversation with another pair across from them, laughing about something Caleb had not heard. He took the seat closest to the wall, the one that faced away from the center of the room. No one acknowledged him. That was fine. He preferred it that way. The ceremony had been short, efficient. Caleb had stood in the back row and watched Marcus exchange vows with a woman named Claire, someone Caleb had never met. They looked happy. That was all that mattered. Caleb had clapped when everyone else clapped, smiled when it seemed appropriate, and slipped out before anyone could catch his eye. Now, at the reception, he told himself he just needed to make it through dinner. Then he could leave. Lily would never know. A waiter approached and filled his water glass. Caleb thanked him quietly. The couple in navy glanced over, gave polite nods, then returned to their conversation. Caleb pulled out his phone and pretended to read something important. It was a skill he had perfected over the years. Looking busy. Looking like he had somewhere else to be. Looking like he was fine. The room began to fill. Music played from somewhere near the front. A jazz quartet performing something slow and elegant. People moved between tables, greeting friends, posing for photos. Caleb kept his eyes down, scrolling through nothing on his phone. He could feel the energy around him, the hum of celebration, but it felt distant, like he was watching it through glass. Then someone sat down beside him. Caleb glanced up. A woman in a deep green dress had taken the chair to his left. She had auburn hair pulled back loosely, and she was alone. No partner trailing behind her, no one saving her seat. She set her small clutch on the table and looked around the room with the expression of someone assessing an escape route. "This is table 18, right?" she asked, turning to Caleb. Her voice was calm, almost tired. He nodded. "Yeah, this is it." She exhaled, something between relief and resignation. "Good. I was worried I'd end up at the couples table up front. That would have been a nightmare." Caleb did not know what to say to that, so he said nothing. The woman did not seem to mind. She leaned back in her chair and watched the room the same way he had been watching it, like an outsider, like someone who had shown up out of obligation, not excitement. After a moment, she spoke again. "I'm Nora, by the way, friend of the bride. Well, former co-worker. We haven't talked in 2 years, but apparently that still gets you a wedding invite." Caleb offered a small, polite smile. "Caleb, friend of the groom, also former. Also haven't talked in years." Nora let out a short laugh. It was not cruel or mocking. It was the sound of someone recognizing a shared truth. "So we're both here out of guilt," she said. Caleb almost smiled. Something like that. Dinner was served in waves. Salads arrived first, then roasted chicken with vegetables that had been arranged too carefully to feel like real food. Caleb ate slowly, grateful for the distraction. The couple in Navy had moved on to talking with the people at the next table, and the rest of the seats around them remained empty. It was just him and Nora at their end, 2 people sitting in the same silence. Halfway through the meal, Nora set down her fork and turned to him. "Can I ask you something?" Caleb looked over, cautious. "Sure." She gestured toward the room, toward all the couples, and laughter and clinking glasses. "Does this ever feel like a different planet to you? Like everyone else got a manual on how to do this, and you just missed the day they handed it out?" Caleb felt something shift in his chest. It was the kind of question no one had ever asked him before, the kind that assumed he might understand. He set his own fork down and considered his answer. "Yeah," he said quietly. "It does." Nora nodded, her expression softening. "I thought so. You've got that look. The one that says you've been on the outside for a while." Caleb did not know if that was an insult or an observation, but it did not sting the way he expected. Instead, it felt like being seen. Actually seen. Not pitied, not judged, just recognized. "I've got a daughter," he said, the words coming out before he could stop them. 17. Her mom left when she was 2. I've been doing it alone ever since. Nora did not flinch. She did not offer sympathy or change the subject. She just listened. "That's a long time to carry something by yourself," she said. Caleb looked down at his hands. "I didn't have a choice. Someone had to show up for her. So I did." Nora watched him for a moment, then spoke again, her voice gentler now. "And what about showing up for yourself?" The question landed hard. Caleb did not have an answer. He had spent 15 years making sure Lily had everything she needed. Stability, routine, a father who did not leave. He had built his entire life around that promise. But somewhere along the way, he had stopped existing outside of it. He had become a role, not a person. And now, sitting here with a stranger who somehow understood, he realized how deeply he had disappeared. "I don't know how to do that anymore," Caleb admitted. His voice was barely above a whisper. Nora nodded slowly, like she had expected that answer. "Yeah, I get that. I was married for 12 years. My ex-husband left 3 years ago, and I spent the first 2 years after that just trying to remember who I was before him. Turns out, I'd made myself so small, trying to keep him happy, that I'd forgotten I was supposed to take up space too. Caleb looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the same exhaustion he felt, the same weight of having spent too long being invisible. They were not the same, not exactly, but they were close enough to understand. "It's terrifying, isn't it?" Nora said. "The idea of being seen again, of letting someone actually look at you and risk them not liking what they find." Caleb felt his throat tighten. He had not expected this. He had come here to survive a few hours and leave. He had not expected to sit next to someone who could put words to the things he had been too afraid to name. "Yeah," he said. "It is." They sat in silence for a while after that, but it was not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that came from two people who had both spent too long pretending to be fine. Then the music changed. The quartet shifted into something upbeat, and people began moving toward the dance floor. Caleb watched couples spin and sway, their movements easy and unguarded. He felt the familiar urge to shrink back, to make himself smaller, to disappear into the wall behind him. But before he could, Nora spoke. "You know what the worst part is?" she asked. Caleb glanced at her. "What?" "Everyone's staring at us." Caleb frowned and looked around the room. She was right. Several people at nearby tables were glancing their way, whispering behind hands, their eyes lingering just a little too long. He had not noticed before, too focused on keeping his head down. But now that Nora had pointed it out, he could feel the weight of their curiosity. Two people sitting alone at the back table. Two people who did not fit. "They're probably wondering why we're not with anyone," Nora said, her tone dry but not bitter. "Or they're making up stories about us. Maybe they think we're together. Maybe they think we're tragic." Caleb felt heat crawl up his neck. He hated being looked at, hated being the subject of speculation. It was exactly what he had been trying to avoid his entire adult life. "I should go," he muttered, already starting to push his chair back. Nora reached out, not touching him, but stopping him with her voice. "Don't. If you leave now, you're just proving them right. You're proving that you don't belong here." Caleb froze. He looked at her, frustration and fear mixing in his chest. "I don't belong here." Nora shook her head. "Neither do I. But we're here anyway. And maybe that's enough." Before Caleb could respond, a voice boomed through the sound system. Marcus stood at the front of the room, microphone in hand, grinning the way grooms do after too much champagne. "All right, everyone. I just want to take a moment to thank some very special people who made it out tonight." Caleb felt his stomach drop. He knew what was coming before Marcus even said it. "First, I want to shout out my old buddy Caleb Turner. Man, I haven't seen you in forever. Glad you could make it." The room erupted in polite applause. Heads turned. Eyes found him. Caleb felt every muscle in his body lock up. He wanted to sink into the floor. He wanted to vanish. Marcus raised his glass toward the back of the room, still smiling, oblivious to the panic he had just unleashed. "To old friends," Marcus said. The crowd echoed the toast. Caleb sat frozen, his hands gripping the edge of the table. 200 people had just been told exactly where he was. 200 people were now looking at the man who came alone, the man who did not belong, the man who had spent 15 years making sure no one ever looked at him this closely. His breath came shallow, his vision narrowed. He needed to leave. Right now. But then Nora did something unexpected. She turned in her chair, looked directly at him, and said loudly enough for the people nearby to hear, "Look at me." Caleb's eyes snapped to hers. She was not smiling. She was not trying to make light of it. She was serious, grounded, unflinching. "Look at me," she repeated, quieter now. Not them. Me. Caleb forced himself to focus on her face, on the steadiness in her eyes, on the fact that she wasn't looking at him with pity or judgment. She was looking at him like he was a person, like he mattered, like he was not disappearing. "You're still here," Nora said. "You didn't run. That's something." Caleb's heart was still racing, but the tightness in his chest began to ease, just slightly, just enough to breathe. The moment passed. Marcus moved on to thank someone else, and the attention shifted away from Caleb. The whispers faded. The room returned to its rhythm. But Caleb could still feel the aftershock. He had been seen. Fully. Undeniably seen. And he had not disintegrated. He was still sitting here. Still breathing. Still whole. Nora picked up her water glass and took a sip, as if nothing had happened. "You okay?" she asked. Caleb nodded slowly. "I think so." They stayed at the table for the rest of the reception. They did not dance. They did not mingle. But they talked, really talked, about loneliness and divorce and the fear of starting over, about the small ways people made themselves disappear, about what it meant to take up space again after spending so long trying not to. And for the first time in 15 years, Caleb felt like he was not alone, not because someone needed him, but because someone saw him. As the night wound down and guests began to leave, Nora stood and gathered her things. She looked at Caleb, her expression warm but uncertain. "This was nice," she said, "talking to someone who gets it." Caleb stood as well. "Yeah, it was." She hesitated, then pulled a small business card from her clutch and set it on the table. "If you ever want to talk again, or just sit somewhere and not feel invisible, give me a call." Caleb picked up the card. Her name was printed in simple black letters, followed by a phone number. He looked up at her, and for a moment, he wanted to say something meaningful, something that captured what this night had meant. But the words would not come. So he just nodded. "I will." Nora smiled. A small, genuine thing. "Good, because I meant it. You deserve to be seen, Caleb." Then she turned and walked toward the exit, leaving him standing there with her card in his hand and a feeling he had not allowed himself in a very long time. Hope. Caleb drove home that night with Nora's card sitting on the passenger seat. He kept glancing at it at red lights, as if it might disappear if he looked away too long. When he pulled into his driveway, he sat in the truck for several minutes, engine off, staring at the dark windows of his house. Lily had left the porch light on for him. She always did. He picked up the card and slipped it into his jacket pocket before heading inside. Lily was awake, sitting on the couch with her laptop open and a mug of tea cooling on the side table. She looked up when he walked in, her expression cautious but hopeful. "So?" she asked. "How was it?" Caleb hung his jacket on the hook by the door and tried to find the right words. He had expected the night to be unbearable. He had expected to spend 2 hours counting the minutes until he could leave, but instead, he had talked to someone. Really talked. And that small act had cracked something open inside him that he was not sure how to close again. "It was fine," he said, which was the truth, but not all of it. Lily narrowed her eyes. She had always been able to tell when he was holding back. "Just fine." Caleb sat down in the chair across from her and rubbed his face. "I talked to someone. A woman. She was there alone too." Lily set her laptop aside, suddenly much more interested. "And?" Caleb shrugged, trying to downplay it. "And we talked. That's it." Lily smiled, the kind of smile that said she knew more than he was willing to admit. "Good. That's really good, Dad." Caleb did not respond. He was not sure it was good. He was not sure what it was. All he knew was that for a few hours he had felt like a person again, not just a father, not just someone going through the motions, a person with thoughts and fears and the capacity to be understood. And now, sitting in his quiet house, he felt the absence of that connection more sharply than he had felt anything in years. The next few days passed slowly. Caleb went to work, came home, made dinner. The routine he had relied on for so long suddenly felt hollow. He found himself thinking about Nora at strange times, while washing dishes, while driving to the grocery store, while lying in bed at night, staring at the ceiling. He thought about the way she had looked at him when she said, "Look at me." The way she had not flinched when he admitted he did not know how to show up for himself. The way she had understood without needing an explanation. He told himself it was just a moment, a brief connection between two lonely people at a wedding. It did not mean anything. It did not have to go anywhere. But every time he passed his jacket hanging by the door, he thought about the card in the pocket. And every time he thought about the card, he felt a pull he could not ignore. On the 4th day after the wedding, Lily found him standing in the kitchen, staring at his phone. She leaned against the counter and crossed her arms. "Are you going to call her? Or just keep torturing yourself?" Caleb looked up, startled. "What are you talking about?" Lily gave him a look that said she wasn't buying it. "The woman from the wedding. You've been weird all week. Just call her." Caleb set his phone down and shook his head. "It's not that simple." Lily tilted her head. "Why not?" Caleb struggled to find an answer that made sense, because he was terrified, because he had not let anyone close in 15 years, because the idea of being vulnerable again felt like standing at the edge of a cliff with no idea how far the drop was. "Because I don't know how to do this," he finally said. Lily softened. She walked over and sat at the table. Gesturing for him to join her, he did. "Dad, you've spent my entire life taking care of me. You've been the most present, dependable person I've ever known, and I'm so grateful for that. But I'm about to leave, and I need to know that you're going to be okay when I'm gone." Caleb felt a lump rise in his throat. "I'll be fine," Lily shook her head. "No, you'll be alone, and that's not the same thing." She reached across the table and put her hand over his. "You taught me that it's okay to ask for help, that it's okay to let people in. So why won't you do that for yourself?" Caleb looked at his daughter and saw the person she had become. Strong, thoughtful, capable. She did not need him to be her entire world anymore. She needed him to have a world of his own. "What if I call her and it doesn't work out?" he asked quietly. Lily squeezed his hand. "Then it doesn't work out. But at least you tried. At least you showed up for yourself." That night, after Lily had gone upstairs to study, Caleb sat on the couch with his phone in his hand. He pulled Nora's card from his jacket pocket and stared at the number. His thumb hovered over the screen. He thought about all the reasons not to call. He thought about the safety of staying invisible. He thought about the 15 years he had spent building walls so high that no one could see over them. And then he thought about Nora's voice. "You deserve to be seen, Caleb." He pressed the number and hit call before he could change his mind. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. He was about to hang up when she answered. "Hello?" Her voice was the same as he remembered. Calm, steady, real. "Nora, it's Caleb." From the wedding. There was a brief silence, then a soft laugh. "I was starting to think you weren't going to call." Caleb felt relief wash over him. "I wasn't sure I should." Nora's tone shifted, warmer now. "I'm glad you did." They talked for over an hour, about nothing and everything, about Lily leaving for college and Nora's job as a graphic designer, about the strange feeling of starting over in your 40s, about how exhausting it was to pretend you were fine when you were not. And somewhere in the middle of that conversation, Caleb realized he was smiling. Actually smiling. Not out of politeness or obligation, but because he wanted to. Before they hung up, Nora asked if he wanted to meet for coffee. Caleb said yes without hesitation. They set a day and time, and when the call ended, he sat in the quiet living room feeling something he had almost forgotten. Anticipation. Not fear. Not dread. Just the simple, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, he could be more than the role he had assigned himself. Their first coffee turned into a second, then a third. They met at a small cafe downtown, the kind with mismatched chairs and local art on the walls. Nora was easy to talk to. She did not ask him to be anything other than himself. She did not try to fix him or fill his silences with empty reassurances. She just listened. And when she talked, he listened too. She told him about her ex-husband, about the slow erosion of her identity during their marriage, about how she had spent 2 years after the divorce learning to take up space again, about the fear that still crept in sometimes, whispering that she was too much or not enough. Caleb understood that fear. He had carried a different version of it for years. The fear that if he let anyone see him, they would find nothing worth seeing. That he had spent so long being a father that he had stopped being a person. But with Nora, he did not feel that way. She saw him. She saw the parts of him that were still broken, and the parts that were trying to heal. And she did not look away. One evening, after they had been seeing each other for a few weeks, Caleb brought her to his house. Lily was upstairs doing homework, and Caleb felt nervous in a way he had not expected. He wanted them to meet. He wanted Lily to see that he was trying. But he was also terrified that bringing Nora into his life meant admitting that things were changing, that the small, controlled world he had built was no longer enough. Lily came downstairs when she heard voices in the kitchen. She stopped in the doorway, taking in the sight of her father standing next to a woman she had never met. Nora smiled and extended her hand. "You must be Lily. Your dad talks about you all the time." Lily shook her hand, then glanced at Caleb with a look that said she would interrogate him later. "Nice to meet you," Lily said, her tone cautious but not unfriendly. They sat at the kitchen table and talked for over an hour. Nora asked Lily about college, about her plans, about what she was excited for, and what scared her. And Lily, who was usually guarded around strangers, opened up. She talked about wanting to study environmental science, about her fear of leaving her dad alone, about how hard it was to feel ready for something and terrified of it at the same time. Nora listened without judgment, and when Lily finished, she said something that made Caleb's chest tighten. "Your dad's going to be okay, you know. He's stronger than he thinks he is." Lily looked at Caleb, her eyes softening. "Yeah, I know." After Nora left that night, Lily sat with Caleb on the couch. She leaned her head on his shoulder, something she had not done in years. "I like her," she said quietly. Caleb wrapped his arm around her. "Yeah, me too." The months passed faster than Caleb expected. Summer arrived, and with it, the looming reality of Lily's departure. They spent the weeks packing boxes, buying dorm supplies, and trying not to talk about how much everything was about to change. Nora was there through most of it, helping when she could, giving them space when they needed it. She never pushed. She never demanded more than Caleb was ready to give. She just stayed. And that steadiness meant more to him than he knew how to say. The day Lily left for college, Caleb helped her carry boxes up 3 flights of stairs in a dorm building that smelled like fresh paint and nervous energy. Parents and students crowded the hallways, everyone navigating the same bittersweet transition. When everything was unpacked and it was time to say goodbye, Lily walked him back to his truck. She looked at him with the same serious expression she had worn the morning she found the wedding invitation. "Promise me you're not going to disappear," she said. Caleb pulled her into a hug, holding her tighter than he had in years. "I promise." Lily stepped back and wiped her eyes. "Good, because I need you to be happy, Dad. Not just okay." happy. Caleb nodded, his throat too tight to speak. He watched her walk back into the building, her shoulders straight, her steps confident. She did not look back. She did not need to. She knew he would be there if she did. The drive home was long and quiet. Caleb called Nora from the road, and she talked to him until he pulled into his driveway. The house felt emptier than it ever had. Lily's room was still full of her things, but the absence was louder than the presence. Caleb sat on the couch and let himself feel it. The grief, the pride, the fear. The strange, fragile hope that maybe he could build a life that was not defined by loss. Nora came over that night. She did not say much. She just sat beside him and let him be quiet. And when he finally spoke, his voice was raw but steady. "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be just me." Nora took his hand. "You don't have to figure it all out tonight. You just have to keep showing up. One day at a time." Over the next year, Caleb did exactly that. He kept showing up. For himself, for Nora, for the life he was slowly, carefully building. They went to dinners and movies. They took weekend trips to places Caleb had never thought to visit. They fought sometimes, about small things and big things, and they learned how to navigate conflict without running. Caleb learned that love did not have to mean losing yourself, that being seen did not always end in pain. That happiness was not something that would be taken away the moment he reached for it. Lily came home for Thanksgiving, and Caleb introduced her properly to Nora over a dinner they cooked together. Lily watched them move around the kitchen, the easy rhythm they had found, and she smiled in a way that told Caleb she approved. After dinner, Lily pulled him aside. "You look different," she said. Caleb raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" She thought for a moment, then said, "Like you're actually here. Not just going through the motions, like you're living." A year after the wedding, Marcus invited Caleb and Nora to his anniversary party. It was at the same venue, the same hall with the crystal chandeliers and white linens. But this time, Caleb didn't sit at the back table. He didn't hide behind his phone or count the minutes until he could leave. He stood in the center of the room with Nora beside him, surrounded by people who saw him and did not look away. And when Marcus raised his glass to toast old friends and new beginnings, Caleb raised his glass too. Later that night, as they walked to the parking lot, Nora looked at him and asked, "Are you okay?" Caleb thought about the question. He thought about the man he had been a year ago, the one who had driven to this same venue convinced he did not belong. He thought about the walls he had built and the slow, painful work of tearing them down. He thought about Lily, thriving at school, calling him every week to share her life. He thought about the fact that he no longer felt like he was disappearing. "Yeah," he said, and he meant it. "I'm okay." Nora smiled and slipped her hand into his. They walked to the truck together, two people who had learned the same hard lesson. That being invisible felt safe, that being seen felt terrifying. But that in the end, the only way to truly live was to let yourself be found. Caleb Turner had spent 15 years making himself small, but now, standing under the stars with someone who knew his name and his story and his scars, he finally understood what Lily had been trying to tell him all along. Being a good father did not mean erasing himself. And sometimes, the bravest thing a person could do was allow themselves to be seen.